The late summer sun burned across the endless plains, casting a golden haze over the wagon trail. Dust hung heavy in the air, stirred by the distant sound of hooves long since gone. By the side of that lonely trail, a woman sat slumped against a broken wheel. Her dress was torn, her bonnet askew, and her eyes, though stubborn, were lined with exhaustion. Beside her, a little girl no older than 8 clutched her mother's arm, her face pale and streaked with dirt and tears. They had been left behind, abandoned when the wagon train moved on without them. The mother's name was Clara. She had pleaded for help when her husband took sick, but the others were pressed on by fear of bandits in the long miles ahead. When her husband died 2 nights past, the wagon master declared he could not risk slowing down for a widow and child. And so Clara and little Mary were left behind with nothing but a small satchel, a leaking canteen, and grief heavy enough to crush the strongest soul. Clara knew she could not walk far in that heat. Her shoes were worn thin, her lips cracked, and every bone in her body ached. She wrapped her arms around Mary, whispering comfort she hardly believed herself. She prayed that somehow, somewhere, mercy would find them. It was then, in the silence of the afternoon, that a distant sound drifted across the prairie. A steady rhythm, faint at first but growing closer, the sound of hooves. Clara lifted her head, shading her eyes. Against the horizon appeared a lone rider, his tall frame outlined against the sky. He rode a dark bay horse, dust rising behind him as he moved with unhurried strength. For a moment Clara thought she might be dreaming, but the rider drew nearer until his face became clear. He was a man in his early 30s, weathered by sun and wind, with a strong jaw and eyes that carried a sadness too deep for words. His shirt was worn, his hat tilted low, and the rifle strapped to his saddle told the world he lived by his own hands. The man slowed his horse, surveying the broken wagon and the 2 fragile figures at its side. His voice was low and steady when he spoke. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat, "you look like you've been left in a hard way." Clara tried to stand, but her legs trembled beneath her. "We've been abandoned," she whispered, her throat dry. "My husband, he passed. The wagons moved on. I have nothing left but my child." The man dismounted slowly, his boots striking the dirt with quiet certainty. He crouched down to the little girl's level. Mary looked at him with wide, fearful eyes, but his gaze softened as he smiled gently. "You're safe now, little one," he told her. "I won't leave you." Clara's lips trembled. "Why would you help us? You don't know us." Most men would ride on. The rancher's eyes darkened, and for a heartbeat the loneliness within them showed. "Because I know what it is to be left behind," he said simply. His name was Jacob Carter. He lived alone on a small ranch a day's ride from the trail. Years before, he had lost his young wife to fever, and with her gone, he had built his world around cattle, fences, and silence. He had no children, no kin, only the land and the aching emptiness of nights that stretched too long. Yet when he saw the widow and her daughter, something stirred in him that he thought had died long ago. Jacob offered Clara his canteen, steadying her hand as she drank. Then, without another word, he lifted Mary onto his horse, securing her gently. He turned to Clara, extending his hand. "You'll ride, too. I'll see you safe." Clara hesitated, pride and fear warring inside her, but at last she placed her hand in his. His grip was firm and sure. With his help, she mounted behind her daughter. Jacob swung up in front, gathering the reins. The bay horse snorted, then carried them forward into the wide, wild land. The ride was long, and the prairie stretched endlessly in all directions. Clara clung to Mary, her eyes half shut against the burning wind, while Jacob guided the horse with quiet confidence. He spoke little, only asking once if they were holding on well enough. His silence, though heavy, carried a kind of strength, and Clara felt for the first time in days that she and her child might yet survive. By the time the sun sank low, painting the horizon in shades of fire, Jacob slowed his horse and pointed ahead. There, nestled against a line of cottonwoods, stood a small homestead. A cabin of rough timber, a corral, a well, and a barn stood proud against the wilderness. It was simple, but it was life. Clara's throat tightened as she looked at it. She had expected nothing, yet here was shelter. Jacob dismounted and helped them down. Mary stumbled on tired legs, and Jacob caught her gently, lifting her as if she were his own. Clara watched, surprised by how naturally he carried the child. He led them inside the cabin, where the scent of wood smoke lingered. Though plainly furnished, it was clean and warm. "You'll stay here tonight," Jacob said. "And as long as you need. You'll not be left on that trail again." Tears pricked Clara's eyes. She turned away quickly, unwilling to let him see her weakness. "You've done more than anyone," she whispered. "I don't know how to thank you." Jacob shook his head. "No thanks needed. Just rest." That night, Clara lay on a straw mattress with Mary curled against her. For the first time since her husband's death, she felt something close to safety. Yet she also wondered at the man who had taken them in. He seemed carved from stone, yet she had seen kindness in his eyes. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but for the moment, tomorrow felt possible. Days turned into weeks, and the ranch began to feel less like a stranger's place and more like a refuge. Clara insisted on working, cooking meals, mending clothes, and tending the small garden near the cabin. Jacob at first resisted, saying she needn't trouble herself, but Clara's spirit would not let her sit idle. Slowly, Jacob grew used to the sound of her voice in the kitchen, the sight of Mary running through the grass, her laughter breaking the silence that had haunted him for years. Mary, too, took to Jacob quickly. She followed him to the barn, asking questions about the horses and cattle. Jacob, unused to a child's chatter, found himself smiling more than he had in years. He showed her how to brush the mare, how to whistle for the dog, how to mend a fence with steady hands. She began to call him Mr. Jacob, though sometimes, when she forgot herself, the word, "ha," slipped out, leaving Clara and Jacob both silent and thoughtful. But life on the frontier was never free from trial. A storm came one night with winds so fierce it tore down part of the barn roof. Jacob worked in the pouring rain to tie it fast, and when Clara ran out to help him, he shouted for her to go back inside. She refused. Side by side, they fought the storm, and when at last it passed, they stood together soaked and shivering, their eyes meeting in the lantern light. Something unspoken lingered between them. Another trial came with men. Two outlaws who rode up one afternoon, claiming Jacob owed them money. Clara watched from the porch as Jacob faced them down, his rifle steady, his voice calm but hard as iron. The men left cursing, and Clara's hands trembled long after they were gone. That night, she told Jacob she feared bringing him more trouble. He looked at her long and steady before answering. "Trouble was here long before you came. But for the first time in years, I don't mind having something worth protecting." The weeks grew into months, and with them, affection grew stronger. Jacob found himself drawn to Clara's quiet strength, her courage in the face of sorrow, the way she held Mary close yet dared to hope again. Clara, in turn, saw in Jacob not just a protector but a man with a heart still capable of love, though buried under years of loneliness. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of red across the plains, Jacob stood with Clara by the corral. Mary was chasing fireflies nearby, her laughter rising into the dusk. Jacob cleared his throat, uneasy with words. "I don't know what plans you had when you set out with that wagon train. But if you've a mind to stay, there'll always be room here for you. For both of you." Clara's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady. "We have nowhere else, Jacob. And maybe God led us here." Jacob reached for her hand, rough and calloused against her soft fingers. She did not pull away. For a long moment, they stood together, the lonely rancher, the widow, and her child, 3 lives once broken now bound together by chance and by grace. And so it was that on a trail where death had nearly claimed them, life began anew. Clara and Mary had been left to die, but fate sent a lonely rancher who could not ride past suffering. In saving them, he found himself saved as well.